Hey everyone, in this video we're going to cover topic 3. We're going to be discussing measurements and unit conversion. So we'll be doing things like converting meters to centimeters, vice versa, and more complex versions of these conversions. So I wanted to emphasize before we get started that unit conversions are super duper important in this class. You can pass chemistry without memorizing any formulas if you know how to do unit conversions. So it's really important you get this down. And honestly, 75% of general chemistry, in my opinion, is just unit conversions. So if you can do this, you can do the majority of this class. That being said, this is a relatively difficult concept because it is math, and it is the majority of math you will encounter in this course. But you need to get a handle on it early, and you need to be able to do it efficiently. So we're going to start working through some examples and get you proficient with this early on in the course so that you can have an easier time tackling the math in chemistry. Okay, so let's talk about units first off. We use a lot of units in chemistry. One of the things you're going to hear me talk a lot about is our SI units, or International System of Units. This is the metric system. We use this a lot in chemistry. You've probably seen it in labs already. We measure things in milliliters, liters, grams, that sort of stuff. Things like meters, kilometers. Other types of units of measurements, these aren't SI, but like seconds and days. Time is a unit of measurement, these sort of things. Grams, micrograms, units of measurements. So let's look at our SI units. So our SI units have certain prefixes. So I have a nice anagram here. I think that's what you call it. Maybe, I don't think that's right. Anyways, I have a nice way for you to remember this. So we have different prefixes for different units. So our base unit here in the center is things like grams or meters or liters. And then from there, we have units that are bigger than our base unit and units that are smaller. So these are the smaller ones and these are the bigger ones. So as you get bigger than a meter, you have, let's use liters as our base units, since that's what this one is in. We have decaliters, or an example of hecta, if you've ever heard of hectares, if you're measuring land. Kilo, a common one, is kilometers, so that's going to be bigger than a meter. Mega, you might have heard of megabytes, so the base unit for that one is a byte. Hertz, gigahertz, you might have heard of that term before. That one's a really big number as well. Then as you get smaller, we have another unit here. So deci for decimeter, centimeter, even smaller, millimeter or millisecond, even smaller, micro, nano, pico, and then femto is itsy bitsy tiny. So I just wanted to demonstrate to you these. Now each time you go up or down from the base unit, in SI units, you gain a 0. So as you go up by 1, you add, so if this is 1.0, now you're at 10. As you go up again, you add another 0, 100, another 0, 1,000, and vice versa the other way. So if you start at 1 for your base unit, you're going to lose a 0, so you'll go the other way. It'd be 0.1. The next one, 0.01, 0.001. You're getting smaller by 10 or larger by 10 each time. Now the way that you can remember these prefixes is by using this little shortcut here that has a letter for each word in the sentence. Great mighty King Henry died by drinking chocolate milk. So that gets you here. Giga, mega, kilo, hecto, deca. There's no base in here. Great mighty King Henry died. Oh wait, no, there is. Base by, deci, drinking chocolate milk. Now the smaller ones you can remember using the sentence. Major, negative, press, followed, micro, nano, pico, femto. So anyways, here's the story of King Henry, who died by drinking chocolate milk. All right. Here's a nice table that kind of lays out all these differences for you in between each SI unit. So this right here, this line is where your base unit is. And as you go up, you're going to get bigger by 10. So this would be 10. 10 raised to the 2 is 10 times 10. So that gives you 100. 10 raised to the 3 is 10 times 10 times 10. So that's 1,000. And so on and so forth there. Now if we get smaller, we've got 10 to the minus 1. So that's 1 over 10. 1 divided by 10 equals 10 to the minus 1. So that's 0.1. If you've got 10 to the minus 2, that's 1 over 10 times 10, which is 0.01. So that's 1 over 100, right? Because this is 100. And with a 3, you can do the same thing. 10 times 10 times 10, that's 1,000. That's equal to 10 to the minus 3, 0.001. Okay. So that's the difference in size. Now, when you want to calculate values, say you have 1 meter, and you want to know how many millimeters is that. Well, think about a meter. A meter stick is like this big. I don't know if you can see me, right? It's pretty big. It's 3 feet. A millimeter is this big. Much, much smaller. So if we think about it in those terms, in every 1 meter, you're going to have a bunch of millimeters. And so what we can do when we want to convert from one to the other is you can take your base unit and multiply it by 1,000 for the millimeters. For the other ones, you're using the other values that correspond to whatever unit you're looking at. So centimeters, decimeters, whatever, micrometers, or even smaller like nanometers and picometers. Now, if you go up, so 1 meter, again, here's your meter stick, right? Let's think about kilometers. Kilometers, we drive those, right? Those are much, much bigger than meters. So if you think about a kilometer, there's going to be multiple meters inside of the kilometer. So what that means is that if you have 1 meter, your kilometer is going to be that meter divided by 1,000, because it's going to be a portion of a kilometer. 1 meter is a portion of a kilometer. So it's not a full 1. It's 0.0001 of a kilometer. We're going to work some examples. So if you can't wrap your head around this yet, don't worry, we're going to get there, okay? But this is a table that's going to help you. In red, you'll see here are common ones that you'll see throughout the semester. So I kind of just highlighted those for you. So if you're going to spend your time memorizing things, I would highly suggest you get kilo and all of these here, centi, milli, micro, and nano as well. We're going to use those a lot in this class. You will need to know the other ones, but if you're going to memorize stuff, I would say focus your efforts there in knowing these conversion factors in between each of them. So let's work an example. Let's look at converting millimeters to meters. So millimeters are itsy bitsy tiny, right? Okay, really, really small to a meter. So let's say we have, 200 millimeters. And we want to know how many meters is that? Well, we can use unit conversion to do this. So if we have 200 millimeters, and we know, according to our table up here, that for every, for every 1 meter, there are 1,000 millimeters. Okay, so it's 1 times 10 to the third. So remember, 1 over 1,000 is equal to 1 over 10 times 10 times 10, which is equal to 10 to the minus third. That's where that value comes from. So here, if we take that value and we put that in our calculator, what you're going to find is 200 divided by 1,000 is going to put you at 0.2 meters. So 200 millimeters is equivalent to 0.2 meters. It's much, much smaller. Now, if we did it the other way, say we had 200 meters and we wanted to go to millimeters, we do the opposite. We'll start with our meters, 200 meters, and we're going to look at our conversion table. We know that for every 1 meter, we have 1,000 millimeters. Same conversion, but remember it's 1,000 times, a millimeter's 1,000 times smaller, so there's going to be 1,000 times more of it. So 1 meter times 1,000 here. And that gives us a much bigger number, 200,000. That's what we're looking at there, millimeters. Now I'm going to show you a way to remember how to do what I'm doing right here. So don't freak out yet. We're going to break this down to make it easier for you. So whenever you're solving word problems, some good questions to ask yourself when you might feel overwhelmed is, what are you solving for? What units are you finding? So that's going to be what your problem equals. So in this case, where we were going from 200 millimeters to meters, what we were solving for was meters. What information we were given, what we started with, was millimeters. So at the end of the day, we're going from millimeters to meters. Now this seems like a simple concept, but when you get into big word problems with lots of text, it might be very hard to identify this. So this is a really good 2 questions to ask yourself if you're stuck on word problems. Okay. All right, now once you do these 2 things, what you want to do when you find what units you're going from and to, you want to cancel these units out to get the unit that you want in your answer. So if you start with millimeters and you want to go to meters, we need to get rid of the millimeters. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use this tactic where we can divide something by itself and it's going to cancel itself out. So millimeters divided by millimeters is equal to 1. The same way if you said x over x, it's equal to 1. They cancel themselves out. So by doing this, you get rid of the unit. So we're going to make sure we do that. So millimeters, and we're going to take it and we're going to divide it by itself. And then I'm going to put the meters on the top, which means we're multiplying by meters. And so what we observe is that our millimeters cancels out. It goes away. It equals 1. There's no other unit left. The unit is gone. And so we end up with this unit on the top in our answer because it's not canceled out. It's still there. So that's what I'm doing there with this method. Keep in mind when I use these parentheses, this is just saying millimeters times your meters over your millimeters. This is your division symbol, so we're dividing there, multiplying here. You just don't have to use a multiplication symbol whenever you have parentheses. Okay. Now the last thing to remember here is that once you cancel out your units, you need to make sure and double check that everything is canceled that you want to cancel. So if you don't want that unit in the answer, it needs to go away. So if you don't want it in the answer, what is on top must be canceled out with what is on bottom. It has to go away. So let's take a look at another example. Let's do our kilometers and centimeters to meters. So our kilometers are, kilometers are 1,000 times bigger than a meter. So for every, for every 1 meter, kilometers are much bigger. There's 1,000 less kilometers, so is equal to 0.001 kilometers, or you could think about it the other way around. 1 kilometer is equal to 1,000 meters. So you could use either of these options that you want. So you could use this conversion option or this conversion option. Either one's going to give you the correct answer. So if we start here with 278 kilometers, We want to find meters. That's what we're solving for. We need to make sure kilometers goes on the bottom. Meters goes on the top. I always like to write my units out first before putting numbers in. Now let's take a look at what goes where. So if we use this first one here, we're going to have 1 meter for every 0.001 kilometers. And if you divide by that number, you're going to end up with 278,000 meters. It's kind of like multiplying by 1,000, right? So if you divide by 0.001, it's the same as multiplying by 1,000. So we could do it the other way as well. 278 kilometers divide by 1 kilometer multiply by 1,000 meters, we get the same number, 000 meters. Okay. Let's take a look at how to do the centimeters to meters conversion. So for centimeters are smaller. So 1 centimeter is equal to 0.01 meters, or the opposite, we can look at the opposite. 1 meter is equal to 100 centimeters, because these are smaller. So let's do that conversion there. 278 centimeters. What goes on top must go on bottom if we don't want it in our answer. So centimeters goes on the bottom, meters goes on the top. And we can use either one of these conversion units because they will lead us to the same answer. So if we did 1 meter on the top and 100 centimeters on the bottom, then you end up with 278. Sorry. It should be smaller than that. It should be 2.78 meters because we're dividing by 100. If you did it the other way, 278 centimeters times 0.01 meter over 1 centimeter. Remember, this is 10 to the minus 2. Remember that? You end up with the same number. So that's how you do basic SI unit conversions. So give this a shot yourself. You may need that table that you had initially. So you may need to go back to that table. Let me pull it up for you really quick. So you can take a screenshot if you need it. So go ahead and take a screenshot of this if you need it. You can also Google an SI conversion table. You will be able to find them. All right, give this a shot yourself. Let's take a look at the answer to this quiz. It says how many millimeters are in 0.1 meters? So if we look at our conversion, we know that for 1 millimeter, this is equal to 0.001 meters, or the opposite is true. 1 meter is equal to 1,000 millimeters. I usually like these. This makes more sense to me, but either way is totally fine. So I'm going to work with this one. So let's start with what we are given, and what we want to find, solving for. So we're solving for this. So we'll start with our given, 0.1 meters. What goes on top must be canceled out on the bottom. So 1 meter. Here's our millimeters. There's 1,000 millimeters in every meter. And that's going to give us an answer in millimeters because this cancels. So there's no more meters in your answer. So what you find when you multiply this out is you're going to end up with 100 millimeters. So that's your answer to this problem. Let's take a look at multi-step conversions. So this can be a little bit more difficult here. I'm going to change this number to make this a little bit harder on us, kiloliters. Okay, so if King Henry was poisoned with 0.001 kiloliters of arsenic in his chocolate milk, how many milliliters were used to cause his death? So let's take a look here at what we're solving for and what we're given. Milliliters is what we're trying to find. It says how many milliliters. So we're solving for this. This is the unit we're going to be solving for. What we're given is our kiloliters. Now this is a multi-step. because we don't know how many kiloliters are in a milliliter, but we do know how many kiloliters are in a liter, and we know how many milliliters are in a liter. So we've got to go from one thing to the other to the other. It's kind of like connecting dots. So we're going to go from kiloliters to liters to milliliters. Since we're solving for milliliters, we know that's the unit our answer needs to be in. That's where we're going with all of this. So let's start with our kiloliters at the beginning, 0.001 KL. Now, if we don't want this unit to be in our final answer, it needs to be canceled out. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure to divide by something in kiloliters. So in order to get to milliliters, we need to go to liters first, because that's the unit that we know. We know that there are 1,000 liters in a kiloliter. Or you could say the inverse is true. There's 0.0001 kiloliters and 1 liter. 1,000 liters in 1 kiloliter. Now we're in liters. So if you look, our unit cancels out here. So we're in liters right now. So for the next step, we don't want liters in our final answer, we want milliliters, so it's got to be canceled. So we're going to put it on the bottom now. We'll put milliliters on the top because we're trying to get to milliliters. We need it there. And we know that in every 1 liter, there's 1,000 milliliters. So what we do in our calculator is we take 0.001 times 1,000 times 1,000. You could divide this by 1 and 1 if you wanted, but again, anything divided by 1 is itself, so we don't need to divide by that number. So when you put this in your calculator, you're going to end up with 1,000 milliliters. And that would be your answer for this one. Okay, give this a shot yourself. In order to solve for this one, this is a multi-step unit conversion. How many minutes are in a year? So figure out what you're given, what you're solving for, what you need to go in between. Think about how many minutes are in a day, how many days are in a year. You're going to need to do all of these things here. Okay, and ignore this second half about converting your answer to scientific notation. We're going to talk about that next time. Let's take a look at the answer to this one here. So we need to know how many minutes are in a year. So we're going to go from minutes to hours, to days, because we know this value. And then from days, we're going to go to years. Okay. So we're going to start with, we're going the other way. Years to days, to hours, to minutes. Because it's asking us to solve for minutes. So we're trying to solve for are in a year. So this is what we're given. So we're going to start with 1 year. 1 year. Now, if it's not in our answer, we've got to cancel it out. So in the bottom here, we're going to put years. On top, we're going to put days. So how many days are in a year? We know there are 365 days in a year. How many hours are in a day? So for every day, there are 24 hours for 1 day. You can put 1 year here if that helps. So you have a number associated with it. Now we're going to go from hours to minutes because that's where our final answer is going to be. So hours, for every 1 hour, we know that there are 60 minutes. And you can put this into your calculator to find the answer. So this gives you a really big number. So 525,600 minutes in a year. That's how you solve this one. Okay, so give this one more try. The more practice you can get with unit conversion, the easier it's going to get, okay? I'm going to let you do this one on your own. This is a multi-step unit conversion, i.e. it's got more than one step. You're given a couple of things. It says if a car travels a distance of 10 kilometers, that's how far it goes, what is the distance in miles? So you'll need to figure that out. It gives you this conversion here. It lets you know how many miles are in a meter, or sorry, how many meters are in 1 mile. You'll need to know how many kilometers as well are in your meters in order to solve for this one. Okay, so go ahead and answer the quiz. Let's take a look at how to solve this problem. So first we need to know what we're solving for. So what is the distance in miles? So we're solving for this. So whatever we do, our answer is going to be in miles. We're given this value, 10 kilometers. We're also given this information. So we need to make sure that whatever we do, we end up with miles as our answer here. Okay. So what I kind of like to think of is I like to connect the dots sometimes. So sometimes I even work these problems backwards. If that doesn't click for you, like don't do that, but let me show you kind of my thought process here. So if miles isn't our answer, it means miles has to be on the top here in our last step. Miles. And something else has to be on the bottom. We're converting from one unit to the other. So the unit that we come from is this one here, because we know how many meters are in a mile. We're given that. 1609 meters for 1 mile. Now we don't want meters in our answer, so that also has to go away. So meters would go on the top, kilometers on the bottom, and then we see that we're given this information. So that would be on the top here. Okay. This information comes from our knowing our SI units. We know that for every 1 kilometer, there's 1,000 meters inside of it. Or the opposite is true. For every 1 meter, there's 0.001 kilometers. So you can think of it both ways. They will both give you the correct answer. Notice here that in this parentheses, I don't have a division symbol. That's because we're just multiplying. So you can have just one thing inside of your parentheses if you want. If this way is confusing to you, what I just did is confusing to you, you can also just say that this is given and it's a single number. It's not this conversion thing here. So it's highly likely you're going to start with this number. So you could also have just started with this number, known you were going here, and work forwards with kilometers here, meters here, and miles here, and go forth with the conversion. So let's put this into our calculator, see what number we get. So I'm going to put this into my calculator, 10 times 1,000 times times 1, and then I'm going to divide that by 1609. So I don't necessarily need to put this in here. So you could just put 10 times 1,000 divided by 1609. Let me show you where I got those numbers from. 10's on the top, so it's multiplied. 1,000's on the top, so it's multiplied. And the 1609 is on the bottom, so it's divided by. So that gives us a value of 6.22 miles. And that would be your answer for this one. So as you can see, there's multiple ways to work these problems. There's no really right or wrong other than you do have to cancel the units to get to your final unit. And however you decide to do that is okay. So if you have a method that you prefer that I haven't shown you here, feel free to use it. That is totally fine in this class.